Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Looks Like We Made It. I'm Izzy Howell and I'm joined by Managing Director and Creative Industry Expert Chris to talk all things video marketing. We are the father and daughter who run the video production company Howell Film, and each week we help everyone achieve amazing results with the power of video across all platforms and media, including TV, in a professional, creative and engaging way. Couple this with a clear video marketing strategy that puts target audiences first, your campaign is guaranteed to deliver. We're always up for candidly conversing about creativity. On this episode, we are joined by Scarlett from Purple Creative and are answering the question, developing consumer personas, is your marketing reaching the right people? So without further ado, let's get started, and of course never miss an episode every Tuesday by giving us a follow or subscribe, as well as finding Howell Film on Instagram and LinkedIn. Let's go!
Let's do it. Well, Scarlett, welcome to the Looks Like We Made It podcast.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm a little bit nervous, as I was sort of saying earlier. I don't know why. It's a conversation that I've probably had lots of times, but suddenly it feels very, very real.
Oh, no, it's absolutely, you're in safe hands. But tell us more about Purple Creative then and how we kind of know each other, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it actually goes back like 6 years, I would say, probably, maybe even longer. You guys could probably correct me, but it was sort of when you guys were beginning. I know that Tommy, who was with you then, kind of reached out to Sarah, who's sort of my counterpart on the sort of operations side, and was saying, you know, I've got this capacity to do these like really swishy marketing videos for smaller businesses, because I think video marketing's always felt a little bit exclusionary for smaller businesses. So to have somebody who was coming in and literally saying, we can make this accessible for these businesses who otherwise would just completely write it out and think, well, we're never going to be able to afford it, was really amazing to sort of hear. And Purple was one of them, really. We're a small agency as well. We're sort of not immune to the same sort of frustrations and challenges as other small businesses. So we had you guys in, you did a film for us. It was great to have that sort of experience. Everyone was sort of very camera shy and a little bit awkward, but it was a sort of a very unobtrusive style. So as the day went on, it got kind of a bit more natural and kind of easier.
So here's the question. So 6 years in, are you still using the 6-year-old film?
We do still have some of it. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? But
no, it's not. It's great that it's got longevity.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, there's still a lot of it that is really, really very relevant. We could probably do with updating some of it. So
this is not why we brought you.
This is not why you brought you in.
It's a timeshare situation. No, we could probably do with updating it and certainly practice what we preach. I always like to say we're kind of like the hairdresser who wears their hair in a ponytail. We're always off doing those things for other people, making other people look really good, that you kind of find yourself neglecting your own stuff sometimes. So it's a challenge, definitely. And again,
I think we use cobbler's kids' shoes quite a lot, don't we, to describe what we should be doing and what we ultimately
that's
don't
it. I mean, you've got to practice what you preach, I suppose, in the creative industry, and often what you put out, it's not a direct reflection of what you do, because I think often the work that your clients get and the benefits they get is what matters, isn't it, I suppose. But it's that kind of added pressure with social media. Constantly people feel like they're watching you all the time to want to do that. But developing consumer personas, then what does that mean?
That sounds like a really grown-up question for this setting.
Yeah,
so,
I'm like
Yeah,
so it's more about just making sure that you're actually giving some thought to who your target audience is, really. So it's probably one of those sort of marketing buzzwords that sounds more big or kind of difficult than it really is. It's about just making sure that you've really tapped into your audience and you're not just putting out content for the sake of it, basically, just because you think, oh, I need to be on this platform because my competitor is or my peer is. It's about making sure that you've sort of sat and thought about, who do I actually want to connect with? What value am I bringing with the content that I'm sharing? And what does that mean for my business? Are they my customer who's going to convert, or am I sort of building that community? And everyone's consumer persona will be different. You might even have multiple personas that you're trying to target in the business, but it's more so sitting and actually having that time to sit and really think about it, rather than just sending out content and just thinking, hopefully this will stick, because if somebody sees it, it just helps you be more considered, I'd say, in your approach, a bit more strategic, really.
Because I think that's the thing. It's like, because obviously we work within targeted TV advertising and everything, and that literally boils it down to individual people or people in communities.
Quite granular, can't it?
Very, very granular. And I think that is essential with the rise of short form content, the rise of the algorithm, etc., is that within that, a lot of social media content, sometimes clients don't really know where it's going. It could be viewed 10,000 times, but that might be in Zimbabwe, not necessarily where they're living. So having that really clear understanding of a target customer is essential. And then, even if it's a smaller pool of people, that can still be beneficial.
In your expert opinion, Scarlett, do you think that the notion of an awareness campaign is kind of old hat and is kind of like a hackneyed thing? People go, oh well, I'm going to send this out. I don't really care who it goes to. I just want people to know we're there. Do you think that the notion of not targeting is, like I say,
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you're a smaller business, usually that means smaller budget. So for me, I'm thinking, well, why would you spend money just to have those sort of vanity metrics of maybe more plays on a video, more likes on a bit of content, when it's not actually an audience that really is sort of engaged with what you're doing? It just doesn't feel like the right way to spend money, basically, or the right way to spend your time either. Like a lot of people we speak to, they're on small budgets, but are also time poor as well. So if you're thinking about how can I get the most from what I'm doing, being targeted in your approach is exactly how to do that. So that would be sort of, I do understand, the awareness campaigns in sort of general, like everyone wants more eyes on their business and to be sort of more prevalent in the community or the area that they're in. That's nice. It's nice for that recognition, but it doesn't necessarily always convert. So if I'm on a smaller budget, I'm looking at who can I sort of target this to in a very specific way to make the most of that.
and how targeted can you go when you're working on a campaign, when you're working with a client? Just how far can you drill in?
It's one of those things, because it's really tempting to be like very, very specific. And I see a lot of people, they'll create sort of real characters from the consumer personas to the point where you're like, oh, I know that person, I recognize that person. And I guess it really depends on what you're selling as well. If it's very niche, then I think your consumer persona will be very niche down as well. If you've got something that's got a bit of a broader appeal, or there's sort of, I guess, less steps and less consideration in the purchase chain, then you're probably going to have somebody that feels a little bit more sort of, I don't want to use the word generic, but almost like that. So it's somebody who feels a bit more of an everyman rather than somebody specific.
I would also say that we with our work with the AdSmart platform from Sky, that everybody believes that they don't fall into that I'm a unique individual and that I'm this and I'm that, and ultimately, whether we like it or not, there are so many forms of metrics that pin you down to whatever it is, income, whatever you do. Yeah, there's hundreds, thousands of these things, and we all, as I say, we all believe we are these kind of like free spirits and we're individuals, but ultimately we are, because there's a whole world around us being in that sort of category.
Often being using targeted information doesn't necessarily, I mean, when you ask a customer, who's your target audience, they might say, well, aged between 30 and 55 and lives in this area. And that is still targeted, but it's still quite broad. But there are loads of other different ways you can target people, I suppose, that go beyond that might necessarily look at maybe personality traits, how they spend, what they like to do as a family. And, there's more kind of personal things as well that you can use to sort of really kind of make sure you get the right consumer.
And does I'm just using this as a way of just getting loads of information out of you, Scarlett. so when you're working on a campaign, depending on the product or service that your client offers, does that directly affect like whether the campaign is going to be a slow burn working up to a crescendo, or do you always have do you look for whatever you're working on? Do you look for a call to action or a response from each part of the campaign?
I don't think you can. I think that there's some things that it is about building awareness. Like you said, I know we're saying we're not doing big awareness campaigns, but there's some things that to sort of shoehorn a call to action in at that point doesn't feel very natural. It feels like, well, why would they be ready to find more information at this point? It needs to sort of feel organic. So if somebody is sort of the viewer, I guess, of this sort of full chain, it doesn't feel like each time they see it, it's like, get in touch, do this, buy that, and it feels very transactional in a relationship. Sometimes it is just a case of like putting content out because you want people to have a laugh at something, or you want to educate them on something that you think is really sort of in tune with what you're trying to do as a business, but there's not necessarily going to be a call to action in that where you're saying, no, go off and buy this product or go off and interact with this service. So I think it can come across as like too forceful if you do it. Yeah. If you do it like that, it needs to be more conversational and sort of build that. You hear the word community a lot, but it is about that in marketing. It's about like finding your people and building that relationship that they come to trust. And part of that is knowing, well, who are your people? Who are the people who are making the purchasing decisions? What is going on in their life that sort of resonates with what you're trying to do, and how are you going to basically add value to them.
Yeah, because I read something recently where I can't remember the quote word for word or who it was by. So if,
Well,
that boils it down. That breaks it
were
down.
you making it up?
I could just claim it as my own at this point. No, it was by like a San Francisco journalist in like the 50s or something. It was in a book I read where he said that the best marketing is just reading something you're interested in that just happens to be selling something. And I think it's like not necessarily trying to give people the hard sell, because no one likes being sold to and you'll automatically want to push away, but rather just engaging in content where people come away with something, they learn something, they experience something new, or they feel something, is so much more powerful. I mean, look at the John Lewis adverts, for example. Like, you don't necessarily have to be selling bedspreads and fascinators, but you can be selling a feeling. And that in itself becomes part of British culture at Christmas, which is the best kind of campaign I think there is, really.
Whole film selling a feeling. Yeah.
All eyes look at you and we judge you. We're going to judge you. Who was that?
I don't know.
You should answer and get him on the podcast.
Get him on the podcast.
Scarlett's phoned a friend.
I apologise. If that makes it in, I apologise. If not, no one heard that.
Well, that's up to me to decide. So that was obviously one half. The question is consumer personas. We know what that is. But is your marketing reaching the right people? Now, that's a big question.
So, I mean, I think it's one of those things that a lot of people are on Facebook, or they'll be on Instagram or other sort of social media platforms, but they spend no time looking at their insights at all. So that sort of data that you get back to say, well, who has actually interacted with this? And you'll get demographic data back and things like, ages, genders and things. I understand that's still quite binary in that sense in there. But it's not necessarily the only information that you can get from there. So if you're doing video content, you want to know, well, how long have people actually watched for? Have they played that full video? Have they skipped through? What about that sort of either connected or didn't, and start to basically play a bit of a detective work. But I think a lot of people don't even bother to look at their insights, or maybe don't really know what they're looking at to be able to start to interpret that.
And I think you need quite a lot of data to be able to get anything from it.
Yeah, it's like you can build correlation, can't you, from different things, but the bigger the data set, the easier it is to sort of make those connections. And I think as well, a lot of people think as well, I got lots of likes on that, so that must have been, it's done really, really well. Go through and see who liked it. Is that anybody who's even in your area? Like you say, like having lots of likes from somebody who's maybe international, when you know that you've got a little shop that you rely on footfall traffic and nobody's going to be coming specifically over from there. Is it meaningful interactions? I think it always comes down to.
We've had it in the past where we've had incredible interaction and likes on posts, and then most of them are related to us in some way, and you realise it's just it's just Auntie Eileen liking everything you do.
Well, that's it. So it's
hello, Auntie Eileen, by the way.
It's in our Midlands branch of our business, but I think, and that's it, because there's the thing with insights, particularly in data that you get from the posts that you put out, that sometimes you have to take with a pinch of salt, because you don't really know what people are doing when they're watching it. So like, it's more about potentially what they're listening to, maybe, as well as what they're seeing is equally important. So there's a big kind of thing I've seen recently where it was through Thinkbox, where they were talking about how with Facebook advertising or Reels or anything like that's basically playing on your phone through a social media platform, you can't tell if someone's got their phone on the side, putting the washing in the washing machine, and then
they probably are as well.
That might be something that you might look at as someone who's watched your video 10 times all the way through. So having that understanding of maybe how you can convert views to and interactions into actual people contacting you. I don't know what's the most valuable really within that.
I think it's like you said, you don't really know. You've got that data back, but you don't really know what's going on outside of that with that person. Like, are they multitasking? Probably yes, because a lot of people are. I think we're kind of used to, as a society, to have, something's playing on the TV, you're on your phone, you're maybe listening to something else. You're never fully in a moment anymore. So I do think it's probably a little bit naive to think that you've got a full captive audience and things. So I think probably an example of just tapping into making sure that your content is connecting with the right people would be, I was speaking to, and I'll try and keep it as vague as possible to not sort of intrude on privacy and things, but I was speaking to somebody who does coaching for like exercise coaching. And she was looking to sort of build a community, particularly among working mums. That was sort of who her target audience was. And she knew that's who she wanted to sort of work with and sort of help them improve their physical activity and in between what's obviously a demanding schedule. So she was writing the most in-depth, wonderful blogs. Like, her tone of voice was perfect. Her topics were really focused. They all made sense. And they were all about sort of Monday motivation. But she was sending them out at like 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. And you're thinking, well, what's happening at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning? They've probably just done the school run. They're probably like just at work. They're not in a space to sit and actually consume that content. So as great as it is, you've already lost a huge portion of people who are just too busy, basically. So just by switching up when she sent it, she changed it to send it on a Sunday, so to like get people geared up for it.
So same
yeah,
content?
same content, same principles, same everything. Just changing it up to Sunday and almost being like, here is your Monday motivation. Here's what, just get you started and sort of G'd up for the week. Her blogs were getting read more. She sort of pivoted and didn't put everything in the MailChimp as well, in the email marketing rather. She would sort of get people back to the website as well. So once you had them back there, that's your opportunity to sort of educate around more about what you do, rather than just sort of relying on these emails that are great, that people are reading them, but they don't necessarily convert. Getting them people back to your website is always a sort of a good tactic, really, in terms of educating your audience about you.
Well, that's a great example of the value of your expertise versus the cost. It's kind of like that's something that, now you say it, well, it's obvious, but ultimately you need your expertise to be able to say, well, do this and you'll get this amazing transformation.
It's looking at it in a different way. And I think, so what if so say we have a client or we all work with someone who runs a campaign and it goes fantastic and they start seeing loads of results, but that campaign's kind of come to an end now, and that sort of, the work that they've had made for that campaign, they've used it and it's sort of all done.
Well, like a 6-year-old video.
Yeah, like a 6-year-old video.
I feel victimized.
Yeah, we're not looking at you, Scarlett.
No,
or anything.
I get it.
But at that point, when that kind of campaign is over, particularly with TV advertising and stuff, when that has ran and it's got its results, they've got the data, it went great, they've got sales. How do they keep that momentum going? Like, how do they go from strength to strength? Because sometimes when we think about marketing, we think about strategy, it's often thinking about what's lacking, but versus what about the people that are doing really well? Like, how do they kind of keep that going? Because we've seen people get momentum going and start seeing results from their reels, from their video marketing, etc. And they have a brilliant campaign and they start seeing all these results and it's amazing, but then they get so swept up in what has happened that they don't necessarily focus on what should happen next. How can people keep that going?
Yeah, so I think consistency is key in any of your marketing. I think if you're doing something and you've done it well, you've got to keep that momentum going, because audiences are fickle, is what I would say. There's so much content out there that if you're not keeping those touch points with people, there's a whole heap of other people who are going to come in and sort of fill that gap for you. So you've almost sort of created this need and then don't necessarily reap the benefits of it. I can definitely sort of see what you mean, especially if it's a TV campaign and things as well. If there's probably been like a lot of structure to that, a lot of build up, and probably a lot of investment as well if it is a smaller business who's sort of taken that on. So I would say, looking at that data and what you sort of got back and then lessons learned. I don't think people do like a sort of post-mortem really of a project after, or a campaign rather, after it sort of happened, and said, what went really well, what could have been better, basically, and sort of learn from that.
So when you Purple Creative, when you take a client on, and you're working on a campaign with them, what's the sort of the kind of like the ideal time frame for a campaign?
I was going to say it would so depend on what they're trying to achieve, really. I think it'd be a really difficult one to give like a sort of a definitive and replicable time scale for it. I think it would really depend on what their goal was.
I was just really just trying to understand whether people's perceptions are that they're hiring a professional, they're hiring expertise, but they want to do a smash and grab. They think, right, okay, well, where's my results? I've done this thing now. Why? Well,
I mean, there's certain things you can do. So sort of like reactive marketing is, I would say, quite a big buzzword at the moment. Everyone's sort of trying to hop on trends and things like that. And I can completely see the value in it if it makes sense for your business. A lot of the time I'll see people who'll sort of hop on like a trending audio or something like that that's going on Reels or TikTok. And you're like, what is the relevance here beyond just using something that you think are going to get more eyes on? And it comes back to that sort of vanity metric side of things of, great, you've had lots of views, But what does that mean? Have they sort of then come and followed your page? Have they sort of gone to your website? Have they got in touch? Have they bought? Like, what is it that's kind of equated to, basically? And it is tempting, especially when you see sort of other people who are getting, you know, lots of eyes on and things like that. But you don't, again, know if that's actually equating to anything for them either. I like that Instagram and other platforms are sort of cloaking that information a little bit, so it becomes less so about how many likes are on a picture and more so about the quality of the messaging, the imagery, what that sort of story that's being told is all about, really.
That's amazing, because I think, and that's very true, is that the with social media is that there is almost like a level of feeling like you've got some control, but really your content and how you use it and your strategy is entirely dependent on the platform's decisions. So Facebook as a complaint always seems to have changes. Like nearly every month you'll go on it and it'll look a little bit different, and they've sort of shoehorned something else into it, like Reels, or they'll try and kind of bring other things into it to try and make it an all-encompassing platform. But within that, you do see a bit like when a tide goes in and out, it sort of pulls people back again, and businesses have to almost relearn how they can use the platform to their advantage. And I think that it levels the playing field in the sense that a lot of businesses don't necessarily have a lot of power over what they can put on social media or their strategy. They just have to kind of work with what's available to them in their environment. And I think short form content as a thing was a very big new thing, and particularly in the video marketing world, because we had to really wrap our head around that, because it's like suddenly trending audio was something that was essential, and if you didn't use that then you wouldn't get any views. But how far do views actually matter? And then they were starting to pull back on that, and instead it was more kind of audio and spoken stuff. But then it's very kind of unclear as to how you can get those results.
I mean, I'm going to probably sound like old grandfather time now here, because ultimately it still boils down to you having a credible business offering, doesn't it? In a sense, like you can have all the most incredible messaging and marketing and whatever around it. I'm not doing what we do or what you guys do, but ultimately you've also got to have a credible thing.
100%. I think people are a lot more savvy and a lot more switched on as well. So I think I was watching I can't remember who the YouTuber was, but they were talking about how they'd seen an Instagram video ad pop up basically for a fashion company, and they'd gone off and they were like, oh, that looks fantastic, I want to wear that type thing. Before they'd even committed to a purchase, they'd gone onto the website, kind of looked around. You're looking for things like, does it have a legitimate address? Are these reviews legitimate? Does it sort of have a delivery policy? And all these other little bits and pieces that are sort of, I guess, housekeeping. But it's that due diligence of making sure that you actually feel like, okay, I am going to part with my money on this service. So as much as they might have a sort of swishy ad and you think, oh, that looks great, nobody's stupid. They want to make sure that they're sort of spending with a reputable business, like you say. So it's building that trust.
Agreed. I think also the bad guys definitely know what buttons to push. Having been a recent victim of online fraud.
And what were you buying?
Yeah, I feel like there's a story here.
I was buying a tiny little mountain bike for my...
Not for you.
No, not for me. I've got an enormous mountain bike, and I was buying a tiny little mountain bike for my grandson. And there was a mountain bike that was the tiny version of my big version, and I just thought that would be so cool for him to have a little tiny version. And basically I wanted the product so much that I chose not to look at all those warning signs. Yeah. And I thought, oh well, SSL, who needs that?
Like,
oh, whatever,
my money.
Whatever. and then ultimately you get the call from your bank saying, we assume you're not out buying jewelry in Tel Aviv right now. And I say, well, no, I'm not. I'm at work. And they say, well, somebody is. And interestingly, I consider myself to be, well, I know how these things work. They couldn't possibly get me. But ultimately, because I was taking it, I wanted that product. I didn't look at those things, and I was duped. And with hindsight, it was a complete scam, and I was...
But it's easy to get swept up in things. I think that, every day we're exposed to, I feel like I'm bringing all the studies here. It feels like University Challenge.
I'm enjoying the stats.
I know, because I just read something recently, and within that I was using my Kindle to highlight pretty much the entire book, so that's why I remembered it. But back in 2007, there was research done to say that we're exposed to, on the everyday, and this was 2007, so I imagine it's a lot more now, 3,000 advertising messages a day. And within that,
exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. But within that, at that point, it was we would consume or actually take in 76 of those a day, which would then become the ones that we actually engage with, connect with, make a sale with or whatever, would be only 12. And I imagine that's obviously grown a lot since then. But that in itself is that if we've gone from the number 3,000 to 12, it makes you think about like, what is it that set those adverts apart? What is it that set those messages apart? Yeah. And, just trying to think now, I then sort of sat there and at the end of the day just tried to remember 12 different adverts or 12 different things I'd seen on social media, and I couldn't really quite pin it down. But it just sort of shows there is a big sea of businesses all selling on these same platforms, and how you kind of stand out and reach the right people, I guess, is the number one thing to try and pin down first and foremost. I think a lot of businesses tend to jump in and think, right, I need to match this, I need to do what they're doing, I need to do this. But rather, is it more about having a unique approach, more kind of,
I think if targeting didn't work, then platforms like Facebook and Instagram, whose whole model relies around allowing marketers and advertisers to reach the right set of eyes, that whole business model collapses. Their whole sort of platform is built on the fact that you can say, I need my audience, or the people who are sort of exposed to this marketing message, to live in a certain area. I need them to be between a certain age. They might have an affinity towards certain products or pages or all these things that help you develop and kind of ensure that the right set of eyes are on there, rather than just sort of probably more traditional forms of marketing. So say, for example, you got a little ad space on your doorstep type magazine. Yes, that's going through the door of every household in a certain area, but how many people are actually that target audience and don't just put it in their recycling? Mm-hmm. So it's like that, the whole premise, I think, is sort of supported by the fact that these social media platforms have very successfully and in a very sophisticated way built up these huge banks of data on people, so that then you as a marketer, you as a small business, can sort of tap into that as a resource and say, great, I need it to meet this sort of certain profile, if you like. And ultimately you're building it around your end audience who you want to reach. Sorry, that was a little bit rambling.
No, that's good. We like a ramble here.
Oh, yeah. This is a ramble safe space.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Feel free to mic drop and walk out. So give us and our audience 3 absolute do's and 3 absolute don'ts.
3's a lot. If you don't feel like 3, then
all right. Well, give us a couple of musts. If you're embarking on a marketing thing, a marketing adventure, a couple of things that you must do, and then a couple of things that you really shouldn't do, and is bad practice. He says, throwing you in the deep end.
I'm like, oh my God. No, I would say definitely go in with a goal. So don't just sit and just think like, okay, we want to be on Facebook for the sake of being on Facebook, or we want to sort of put out video content for the sake of it. Make sure you're very clear in what your goal is. I think setting timescales as well is helpful for it, but they need to be realistic. So if you're, like you were saying earlier, if somebody wants to do a smash and grab, well, that might work in the short term, but you're not going to build credibility, and you're not going to build that sort of return and repeat business, which a lot of people rely on, basically. So be realistic with your timescales as well. Really, I mean, it does come down to, I know this is sort of the whole topic of it, but it really does come down to sort of knowing your audience and putting that time into research. So, just thinking, okay, I'm going to put this out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, hit every platform. Are they actually on there? Is that the right medium and channel to reach them? Could you try something different? So, for example, I've never considered doing a podcast, but here I am sat here because I know that, like me, a lot of people are busy. It's a really sort of easy way to consume that information and sort of do it in quite a passive way. You can have it on in your car, you can have it while you're doing the cleaning and things, and you don't need to sit and watch and engage on that deep level, but you still get the benefit of that information. So it's about knowing your audience is so important in that, because when you know your audience, you know how and where they consume content, basically. So that was a bit of a roundabout way. I don't even know if that was 3.
No, that was about 9. That's great. So give us a couple of don't do this.
Don't do everything because you think you have to do everything. That would be sort of the biggest piece of advice. I speak to a lot of people who are sort of managing their own marketing, which is absolutely fine and completely get it as well, especially if you're sort of a new business or you're a smaller business and you just don't have the funds. You'll hear people say, oh, I need to post on Instagram and I need to post on Facebook and I need to put a video out and I need to do all these different things. And you just think, well, why? Who told you that you need to do all that? what I think the result of that is just poor quality content. So you're just putting out information because you feel that sort of perceived pressure from outside to just be everywhere. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is like, don't think that you have to be on every single channel. Consider what the ones that bring you value are, really. And don't just leave ads. I know we're kind of going back, but don't just leave ads ticking away. Continually monitor them. I'm such a control freak with things like that. I don't want to let go of that. And you know, Facebook and Instagram and all these other places where you can do paid advertising, you can go in and continually monitor and adjust. So are you hitting the right amount of people? Are you spending what you want to spend? Is it actually achieving anything as well? So that monitoring is really important, I would say.
Amazing. That answers your question with
That's
all
brilliant.
the do's
That's
and
a
don'ts.
fantastic answer.
Well, second to last but not least, I obviously have my silly question to add in there at the end, which I have thought of, which is very good. So
Modest.
if exactly, you'll be the judge of that. So if someone's marketing and they're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, it's not reaching the right people. Scarlett is totally right. I'm doing this all wrong." How did they engage with you? And you're welcome to plug whatever you like at this point.
All this is so. I don't want this to feel like a sort of advert for Purple, because it certainly isn't, but it would just be reaching out to have a conversation. So we don't necessarily have packages that we sort of sell on. It's very tailored to the individual's needs. So whether that be budget, outcome, goals, whatever that is, we'll try and, you know, make sure that we're giving the best value really to our customers. So you are very welcome to visit our website.
And there's no geographic reason why people can't engage with you, is there?
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, most of our audience is sort of kind of local-ish, because sometimes it's nice to just pop in and put face to name and have those conversations. But with Zoom and Teams and all these other things, there's no reason that we can't work with anyone basically across the country or even internationally. I mean, I'd love to have clients somewhere hot so I could have an excuse to go out. So if anyone's in like the Maldives, please email me.
So any listeners, please. Yeah. Fantastic. And thank you, Scarlett. That was absolutely amazing. I feel like I've learned a lot. That's brilliant. Yeah. And my last question is not too silly, actually. It is, if the internet just shut down and all kind of technology and smartphones, etc., just shut down, but they said everyone is allowed one app to save out of this burning building, what app would you save? Or platform, whatever it may be. Just
me as a grown-up business person, or me as a...
In general.
Well,
I'm just
the first thing I would say is that I live in a village that's only just got the internet. So on that basis, that you know, I'm still in a world of discovery.
So I need to explain the concept of apps to you, do I?
I would keep YouTube.
Interesting. Why is that?
Just because I just want to be told how to do stuff by a 12-year-old in Illinois.
Okay, good. And that's how
question.
That's how we built our business.
Seriously, every technical question I've ever found myself stumped with, it's always some kid in America that's got the answer. So that's why I keep YouTube. And also, as you know, I enjoy watching people fix brakes on old buses.
Yeah, and I still haven't quite figured out why, but it's great.
There's no answer to that. So yeah, so there you go. YouTube would be mine.
Fantastic, and that's great. And if you are someone who repairs brakes on buses, you know you have an audience member. So get making
this
stuff
is
on
your
YouTube.
Subscriber, yeah.
This is your subscriber. He's talking to you now. Scarlett, how about you?
Oh, it's such a hard one, because immediately I went to WhatsApp, but if I'm thinking, well, okay, I might still have SMS, so I could still keep in touch. Would that be right?
I don't know. I haven't made up
Is
the
there
rules.
lots of rules for this? If we took communication with our family out of the question, then I probably would say something like YouTube as well, just because I do love short form video. I think it's cracking. But for the most part, it doesn't captivate me in the way that a really good quality bit of information that's put together by somebody who, like you said, is expert in what they do. And you just think, like, thank you. I'd have had to go and pay a lot of money to get this bit of information, and you're just giving me it in such a concise and easy to sort of access way. So yeah,
Brilliant. Well,
So how about you then? Here we go.
Well, this is kind of awkward.
Is it going to be
because I think
Angry
we're all-
Birds, is it?
Jenga. No, we're all saying YouTube, which is interesting because actually there's a good advert for YouTube here in that, but it is a platform that obviously was massive in the 2010s in particular. Like, it just sort of shot up and everyone was a YouTuber and it was big and everything like that. But I think there is still a lot of creative value in longer form content that you don't necessarily tend to see in short form. Short form is kind of like the quality does massively vary, and there's no real explanation why one thing's successful and one thing's not. So being able to just have the best of both worlds, look at on-demand sort of style stuff, more TV style stuff on YouTube as well, You can use it for loads of different things. It is the world's largest search engine. It's not a video platform, it is a search engine because, like I said, we're all looking for how to do stuff, and it's fantastic.
So we're going to wrap this up by this video. This podcast
was
was brought to you by YouTube.
Yeah, ironically, a place you can't listen to this podcast. So that was it for today. Thank you, Scarlett, for coming along, and hopefully we didn't grill you too much. We hope you've enjoyed listening. Of course, if you enjoyed us so much, feel free to give us a rating and let us know what you think. If you have a question for us to answer, or you want to be a guest on our podcast, just like Scarlett, please go to www.howellfilm.co.uk and drop us a line via our contact form. There's still plenty more to talk about in the world of video marketing, and we'll be joined by more Purple Creative team members in the upcoming weeks. So it's a bit of a purple takeover that we're doing, but you're all going to come with some amazing questions. Once again, we're Chris and Izzy from Howell Film, and we help everyone achieve amazing results with the power of video across platforms and media, including TV, in a professional, creative and engaging way. Couple this with a clear video marketing strategy that puts target audiences first. Your campaign is guaranteed to deliver. Of course, never miss an episode every Tuesday by giving us a follow or subscribe, as well as finding Howell Film on Instagram and LinkedIn. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.